And Congressman Steve Cohen is a Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome, Briana. Nice to be with you.
Your chairman says this agreement was reached with the Department of Justice about evidence from the Mueller report. What are you now getting access, you want access to?
Well, it doesn't suffice because it's none of the grand jury testimony, which we want Bill Barr to go with us to the court to ask for the grand jury testimony, and I think that's going to be the most compelling testimony. It's obviously not going to be anything that has to do with ongoing investigations, but this would be evidence that Barr just chose to redact based on his belief that people's reputations might be harmed. And there is some material that might be helpful. I don't think it's as much as we want. Most of the material we want is in the grand jury format. That's where the questions were asked of witnesses that ended up getting indictments, and they were seeking indictments. So I think this is good, but I don't think it's anywhere near what we want, and that's going to be something we'll have to take time to find out if they're willing to give us more, and if they aren't, we'll have to go further.
You're going to be hearing from John Dean, former White House counsel to Richard Nixon, here in less than an hour. What do you want to hear from him?
Well, I think as he explained, there's parallels to Watergate. Nixon's final straw, I guess, was obstructing Congress's hearings and investigations, not turning over materials that requested through subpoena, and it's similar to what we have here, although that's beyond the Mueller report. The Mueller report's about obstruction of justice of the special counsel itself, and of course Nixon tried to obstruct that too and had his Saturday Night Massacre and other situations like that. But John Dean can give us information on comparisons about obstruction of justice, the elements of obstruction of justice, which show, as well can Joyce Vance and Professor McQuaid, both of whom would be expert witnesses. They're law professors and former U.S. attorneys, and they're familiar with the elements of obstruction of justice. They're intimately familiar with the Mueller report. The best evidence would be Mueller, would be McGahn, would be Hope Hicks, and others that we've requested, but they've not complied with subpoenas, so we have not gotten the best evidence yet.
Unlike those folks, John Dean is not a material witness, as even he is very quick to point out. Some critics say that this appearance is just a show. What do you say to that?
Well, it's not just a show, but for the part of it that it is a show, it's okay. The American public needs to be shown what was in the Mueller report. I think it's been said only 2% of the people read it, and I can understand that. It's not the most, it's not page-turner material. So the American public took what Barr gave them in his 3.5-page synopsis, claiming there was no collusion, and collusion's not even a legal term and was not in there, and there was no obstruction, and that's not what Mueller found. Mueller wrote Barr twice to say he didn't give the full flavor of his report, and he tried to change it. So Barr gave that, and then when he finally released the papers, 2 hours prior to releasing the report, he had a press conference and continued and said 5 times, no collusion and no obstruction. Barr was colluding and obstructing with his synopsis and with his press conference. And the American public let that seep into their brains. The president played on it and tweeted it over and over and over again to where many of his folks believed it and never read anything. They need to hear the truth, that there were 10 to 12 instances of obstruction of justice, that prosecutors felt, 1,000 prosecutors signed a letter to say that was obstruction of justice, the elements were met, and if it weren't the president, who was protected by a Justice Department guideline that says you can't indict a president while he's in office, he would have been indicted. Just like individual one was not indicted along with Michael Cohen, but if he weren't president, individual one would be with Michael Cohen and would be in jail for paying hush money.
You just said to the degree that it is show, that's okay. You said that's okay. Well, I mean, we know that you are okay with some political theater. You certainly have orchestrated some of this in the past in the process of this congressional investigation. I mean, who could forget Chicken Barr, who we see right here, the chicken statuette that you brought to the committee room when the Attorney General failed to show last month, or the KFC. We see the bucket there. You did enjoy that before the cameras. I wonder, though.
Let me make a point, Briana, now that you brought it up. That was not during the committee meeting. It was not on the floor. It was not during session. It wasn't in the chamber. It was done prior to the committee coming in and convening the meeting. After the committee was convened, I did no more eating. I did nothing else, and that's been overplayed. But I think I got my point across that Bill Barr was chicken, and that's what I intend to do, and I had a little fun. And Andy Kaufman would have enjoyed it.
And I wonder, Well, one of your former colleagues, not so much, though, which I wanted to ask you about. Congresswoman Donna Edwards took aim at the antics in the Washington Post last week. She said, quote, "The country needs to hear from Mueller and witnesses within the serious framework of an impeachment proceeding. No fried chicken buckets and no one-liners, please." She doesn't think that these antics help the process, whether it's done before the hearing or during, right? She's not making that distinction. What do you say to that?
I've known Donna a long time. Donna has her opinion. I think she's falling in line with what is kind of the Washington insider elitist thoughts. I've had a lot of people tell me they enjoyed it. They thought it was funny. But beyond that, it reached more people that would not have known that Barr didn't show up, that he was avoided a subpoena, that he did not show, and it got a lot of attention. I didn't appreciate the late night comics. I think some of them were wrong, but it reached their audience that otherwise don't watch CNN, don't see MSNBC, and would not have known anything about it. So the reach was expanded greatly. I think people got it. I think they understand it. And it's history.
You're right. It did expand the reach there. I want to know, though, as you know, you want impeachment. And we saw last week, facing pressure from the chairman on your committee, that Speaker Pelosi reportedly said behind closed doors she wants to see Trump in prison, not impeached. Does that kind of rhetoric satisfy someone like you? Does that satisfy you personally as you are demanding impeachment?
It doesn't satisfy me. I think my district is for impeachment. I took an oath. I believe my oath requires me to be for impeachment because this president has committed impeachable offenses. And I think it's the duty of the House to bring those. I think Lawrence Tribe set out a different process where we could have an impeachment hearing and not turn it over to the Senate and make our own conclusions and say it was a sense of the House and declare that he committed impeachable offenses. But if it went to the Senate and they had a little trial, even though Mitch McConnell's already said case closed, I think the senators who did not vote to convict after evidence was adduced would be vulnerable in their own elections come the fall, even in red states, because I think the tide's going to turn on the opinion just like it did in Watergate. It started at 19% and it went to 57% after the hearings. I think the hearings will make it grow more and more, and the Republican senators could be vulnerable, and we need to win the Senate too. But the main reason I'm interested is not so much to win the Senate, which is a byproduct. It's because I think he's committed impeachable offenses. He needs the scarlet eye on his chest, and that's what I think we should do, is stand up for the rule of law and not let this president get away with ordering people, asking people, telling people not to comply with subpoenas, not to produce evidence, and continuing to say the press is the enemy of the people, and benefiting from his presidency by getting emoluments violations by the galore and having people stay at his hotels in Ireland, at his hotels in Washington, and rent in his office buildings in New York and all over the country. And we filed amendments to appropriations bills to stop that.
All right, Congressman Steve Cohen, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being on.
You're welcome, Brianna.